This is the exercise review for the event attendances page. And so what we did in this exercise is we are replacing the event ID and the runner ID, or it was user ID. I changed the column runner to column runner, or that was the user ID. So what we're doing here is changing the IDs to something more user-friendly. And so I hope you came up with something like this. And remember, we started out, I said there's an easy path to follow. So if we jump in the code and we don't even know kind of what's going on here, if we looked under our API, so we have a web REST, and we kind of figured that RFB event attendance resources would do that. So the request mapping is /API. And then we were looking at RFB-event attendances, but that was a Git mapping. So that kind of brings us to here. Then what we do is we actually get a page. So we're paging here in case we have a bunch of records. We don't want to return them all at once. We're calling RFB event attendance service find all. So we have an event attendance service. This is just the interface. So we have an actual implementation here. And so if we go down to find all, that is basically calling the event attendance repository. So it's finding all, it's getting back pageable object, and it's mapping those using the RFB event attendance mapper to DTO for each one of them. So if we look at the event mapper, this before had both the IDs in here, and this is kind of where the problem starts. So instead of jumping through the code here, I'm gonna jump over to GitHub. And so if you want to pull this branch, there is an event attendance exercise complete, because at the time that you're watching this, the master branch is going to be ahead of this. But if we look over here to commits, and this is the last commit, so I'm gonna take a look at this. So in the RFB event attendance DTO, we had an event ID and a user ID. So we changed those to be the actual event and user objects. So with that, we had to remove the old getters and setters and create new getters and setters. So that was pretty easy because you can generate those right inside of IntelliJ. So once we have that, it's really just changing the front end. I'm sorry, we had a couple more changes here on the mapper. So on the mapper, instead of just referencing the ID, we're actually referencing the actual event DTO and user DTO. So we made changes here and here. And then on the front end, I just changed this user column to say runner. And I made a mistake in the exercise description. I kind of said, use the runner's first name and last name. And we don't actually have a first name and last name. We just have a username for that runner. I'll talk to John. I don't know if we want to change that so that they do have a first name and last name, but either way, that doesn't really change this. We're just getting information from the user object and we're outputting it. So we're doing a check here. We're making sure that the event ID here is okay. And all right, now on the UI side, there were a few changes. Let's just go ahead and view this file. And what we did here is a couple things. One, I changed the column title to runner because that's what it is. It's a runner, not a user. And then we're still using the ID, but to get the ID here, you have to go to RFB event attendance, the event DTO, and then get the ID. And instead of in there, we're actually using the location name, and then I just had a colon, and I'm using the attendance date, and I'm using just a pipe to kind of get a date format on that. So that's the date, and then the user, again, still using the ID, and here we are using that username. So if you look at this, and you look at the network here, if we go ahead and refresh this, we'll look at the data that's coming back. That'll make a little more sense. So see here, instead of an ID now, we have an event DTO, which in the event, it actually contains the location DTO as well. And then there we can get the location name. And from there we have a user, and the user has an ID, a username, and a home location ID. So that's how we were able to make some pretty simple changes here to the user interface that is going to be much easier for anyone managing these objects to work with. Instead of just dealing with IDs, it just makes more sense to have some user-friendly data here. So I hope you had fun on this exercise. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. And with that, let's keep building this application out.